Okay, all right.
All right.
Okay,
Because if we're in the same place next
week. Okay, then well then we'll tell the story. Okay, yeah.
To be continued.
I ain't going
To be
from the hero to the
continued. Yeah,
goat,
that's
so,
right.
yeah.
But anyway, our original company said you need a $30,000 chiller, and it sounded like a lot because we'd already replaced it just a few years ago. And anyway, Sam sent out a guy, and we think we've got a fix. So anyway, thank you. But my point in all of that is our lives are fairly cushy compared to Jerusalem 700 BC or 650-ish BC, right? So, it's all relative. We only know what we know. My grandparents, and I've shared this with you guys too many times, I realize that, but I was 8 years old when my grandparents got indoor plumbing.
Yeah.
So we use the outhouse when we go to Grandma Widger's house, and my mom refused to go out there except for short spurts. She did not want to have to use the outhouse. I thought it was an adventure as a small child. I didn't know any better. But just the changes in the last, 50 years, 70 years, have been amazing to the world. And so when we complain that things aren't good, it's all relative, right? It's what we know. And so it is difficult for our era. But when we compare it to some of the things that have gone on historically, we kind of have to say, maybe it's not all that bad. Yeah.
But there are places in the world where it is that bad right now.
Oh, yes.
People are being slaughtered in Nigeria.
Yep.
And
Yep. Yeah, thank you for that. That's a very,
remember.
it's important to remember. Just
We live this way doesn't mean the whole world is.
Yeah. If you were born in America, you hit the jackpot. That's all there is to it. You're lucky. You're fortunate. You're very blessed. There's a lot of different ways to say it, but all in all, it's not because you were great. You were just happened to be born into a world that we have all the luxuries that most of the world still doesn't. And so, but yeah, this is very disturbing, right? How many of you knew that the Jewish women were cannibals before we did this study? Yeah, you probably wouldn't have ever heard that. It doesn't come up in the VBS curriculum. Hey guys, today we're going to go talk about Abraham and Isaac and Moses and cannibalistic Jewish women. Yeah, you never hear about this, but was
it wrong in God's eyes that after they passed, they did this?
That's a great question. I'm going to say yes, just because it's atrocious to us. And my moral compass says yes. I would think, I can't tell you off the top a Bible verse that says that, but just the internal compass of my own kind of the Holy Spirit. You got to remember, why did God allow Nebuchadnezzar and his people to come in and take over? It was because, and we'll get to this in just a second. It was because all of the prophets, priests, and kings had turned their hearts. And they were so evil that God said, the only way I'm going to get their attention is to let them totally be devastated and wiped out. Jimmy.
I just want to say something about when you talked today in church about during the service about eating the sacrificial food.
Right.
In some ways, we need to realize that humans are different than other animals in this world.
Yeah.
That we are made in God's image.
Yeah.
So you could say that humans are
separate category.
There's something special about humans.
I would agree with that. Somebody Google on their phone quick. Is there a Bible verse telling us you can't cannibalize? I don't know if there is. Sam, your question is a very good question. I don't know the answer to that.
I would think the commandment that says do not kill.
Well, but they were already dead. They died of starvation. And they're boiling their starving children's bodies. They didn't kill their children. Now, they had killed their children previously. That was part of the abomination as to why God let the Assyrians take over, is because they had allowed child sacrifice in the temple. That was part of it. But that's not necessarily what this is talking about right here. So, like I said, Happy Mother's Day. Just discouraging, isn't it? Right? But this is this is what was happening. It was such a mess that actually occurred. And some
Leviticus
people,
26, verse 27 to 29.
Okay.
You will, God warns Israel what would happen if they continually rebel, which is
Yeah.
what's happening here.
Right.
You will eat the flesh of your sons and daughters.
so it's predictive. It's not saying you can't do that though. It's not prohibitive. It's predictive.
Right, and Deuteronomy also says, you will eat the fruit of your womb, the flesh of the sons and daughters the Lord your God has given you.
Gross.
It seems like it's a condemnation.
It is. Yeah. There's no doubt.
But there's been some things in recent times
Mhm.
where
Where people-
accidents were in,
Yep.
they're snowed in,
Yep.
and that was their only way to survive is
Yep.
wait until one of them passed.
Yep.
And then
The only known convicted cannibal in the U.S. Well, okay, before Jeffrey Dahmer. This was actually, it was a story like Sam was telling. It was the story of, where's my brain now? Alfred Packard, yeah. Alfred Packard they were in an avalanche in a cabin up in Colorado, and Alfred Packard ate some of the other guys, and then he was convicted. And the University of Colorado, being the liberal bastion that it is, they would have Alfred Packard Day every year, and they would celebrate with all kinds of weird treats, and it was weird. It was weird. But Alfred Packard was actually buried in the cemetery in Littleton, Colorado, where I grew up. And one of the
I'm
Field
surprised
trips.
They put them in a cemetery. 'Cause
Yeah, I usually be outside of a cemetery, yeah. But it wasn't a Christian cemetery, it was a public cemetery. It wasn't a Christian cemetery. You guys know about that? Like in small town, rural churches, they have these cemeteries. And for example, if you took your own life, you would not be allowed to be buried in the cemetery. They would place your headstone outside of the cemetery because you were considered outside of the family of
That's
God.
Christian too, not just Catholic?
Yeah, a lot Lutheran cemetery that my mom went to as a kid. There was one headstone that was outside of the fence of the and it was. I said, why is that one over there? And she said, because they committed suicide and they wouldn't bury them in the cemetery, which seems harsh to me.
Really?
I think we have a little different understanding of mental illness today. I'm not trying to make excuses for anybody who would commit suicide. It's a sin, right? It's wrong. But does that mean that the grace of God can't cover that sin? That's
your
the question.
sermon today.
Yeah, I think God's grace is bigger than any behavior that we could ever do.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
Walt has something to say.
Well, yes, sir.
My home church in Barney, North Dakota had that.
Yeah.
Those that didn't believe.
Yeah.
They were buried outside. A few years back though, they finally included them.
Oh, they did. They included them. That's good. I mean, I think not believing is different than taking your own life, perhaps. Not believing assumes that they've rejected Christ, right? Killing yourself, you have to be in a really dark place, obviously. But does that mean that you've ultimately rejected Jesus? I can't be the judge of that. That's for God to judge, not for Doug to judge, right?
Right.
And so, I don't know. When people want a definitive answer on that, I say, I can't give it to you. It's God's call, not Doug's. So,
I'm just kind of dealing with this at work. There's a guy that's son, there's a Christian family, I know that much. But anyway, he was, in his late 20s,
okay.
and they found his body.
Oh,
They
yeah.
think he probably committed suicide.
Yeah.
Nobody will say that.
Yeah.
What can you say? What do you say to people? I mean, to the parents.
Yeah,
I say
obviously.
nothing because I don't know what to say.
Yeah, well, I think I would encourage you to say something, because I think saying nothing, what people take that to mean is you don't care. What you can say instead is, I don't know what to say.
Or you
I'm
can
so
just say, we're
sorry.
so sorry for your loss.
Yeah, I'm so sorry for your loss.
Well, it's rough because he called work and talked to our supervisor and asked him what people were saying.
Oh,
He's so worried about
wow.
people thinking that his son committed suicide.
No.
So it's really.
Yeah, that's a hard one. It's really hard. My sister has attempted suicide several times, and I've shared her mental illness story with y'all. I remember we were living in Oklahoma City.
That's
And-
the last time that she tried.
Yeah, and she overdosed on a bunch of pills, and they had to evac her from up in the mountains. She drove her car and just took a bunch of pills, and then flew her back to. They had to fly her
She
with
also
the.
slit her wrist.
She slit her wrist, and anyway, by God's grace, she's still with us.
Amen.
Yeah, some days I'm annoyed by her still. She called me 3 times before 7 a.m. this morning, but that's okay. I'm kind of her lifeline, and it is what it is. And
Yeah,
so
when she woke up, Doug told her, if you ever try this again, I'm not going to be here when you wake up. If you don't.
I don't remember that.
I do.
That
I
sounds like
remember
a
you
harsh
said
word,
those
but
words.
maybe it's helpful. I don't know.
But
There's no good
She hasn't
words.
tried it since. I
Are
love
you
you
big
too
brother?
much, is what
Are
you
you
said.
big brother?
I love you. Yeah, I'm the
Yeah,
oldest. Yeah.
okay.
And so I don't know how we got onto this. Eating children, Alfred Packard, suicide. Okay.
A lot of fun topics.
A lot of great topics. Happy Mother's Day.
According to my Google.
All right. Yeah. Well, yes, ma'am.
God does not approve of or, quote, allow cannibalism as a moral action.
Sure.
It goes on, but then it does reference the verse up there, Lamentations.
Yeah.
4:10. Because it says, humans are created in God's image. They possess a dignity superior to animals,
Agreed.
and cannibalism treats humans as animals.
Yeah.
Which is contrary to the biblical teachings.
Yeah.
And it
Bless you.
almost always implies murder.
Yeah.
But then it talks about extreme conditions as in.
Yeah, as in the Alfred Packard and the guys who we got avalanched in and whatnot. The reality of it is if it kind of just makes you go, ick, it's probably not good, right? It kind of makes you go, ick. And that's what happens here. You just kind of hear that and you're like, oh, dude. And so obviously God would not, again, we'll let God be God. There are no verses that I'm aware of that speak directly to this cannibalism. There was the predictive verses of saying, when you turn your back on me, this is what's going to happen to you. You're going to end up doing this. And so that's the reality. But it's never something God would desire, obviously, right? So let's go on to more fun. Lamentations, yes. The Lord gave full vent to his wrath. He poured out his hot anger, and he kindled a fire in Zion that consumed its foundations. The kings of the earth did not believe, nor any of the inhabitants of the world, that foe or enemy could enter the gates of Jerusalem. All right, so let's just talk about a few of these things here. This business of hot anger.
Fire.
Yeah, there's all kinds of Old Testament references to fire, and they usually have to do with judgment. Not all of them, but many of them have to do with judgment. Sodom and Gomorrah, what did he rain down? Fire and hail and all kinds of bad stuff, right? Sulfur, yeah, all kinds of burning things, right? And he, who's doing this? The Lord is doing this, right? The Lord, and he kindled the fire in Zion that consumed its foundations. Interestingly, right? Think about what you build a foundation out of. A strong foundation is built of some kind of stone, right? There is no fire that's going to burn stones. That's
Well,
just-
unless it's God's fire.
Yeah, that's where I'm going. Yeah. Only God can burn the foundation of stone. So,
Elijah and the prophets of Baal.
yeah, there are times when God, yeah, you remember Elijah, there's 700 prophets of Baal, and they have this big kind of standoff. Whose God is better, the God of Baal or the God Yahweh? And it's 700 against one. And Elijah calls the Lord, and he says, prove to them who's who. And so the 700 guys go, oh yeah, you think you're something. And they say, so Elijah puts water all around it and covers it up. And then God comes down and he consumes everything, right? And it's just unbelievable. The consumption of God through fire, through his hot anger, through his passion. And so don't mess with the Lord's passion, right? Just don't get on the wrong side of that, because it'll consume you down to the foundation. And all the other nations, the kings of all the earth, did not believe that any foe could take down the gates of Jerusalem. You guys, we've talked a little bit about this before when we have talked on this study, but Jerusalem is built up on a hill. And there is, and it was, fortified. It had, here's my beautiful fort. Okay. All of you online are laughing at me right now. Yes, I know. But there's a fort on top of the hill. The walls of Jerusalem, in the eyes of the kings of that day, were impenetrable. So what did Nebuchadnezzar and his forces do? They put a 2-year siege on them where they didn't let food come in or out. And so going back to this verse, is it any surprise after 2 years of no food coming in or out that this happens, right? And nobody on earth, none of the leaders of the world, they had these little fiefdoms. We think of kings being over large swaths of land today, but in that era, in that day, there were tons of little kings. The countries were not like what we think of. They were like states, feudal states, where a king would have a couple of towns that he was king over. So a lot of the, like we're going to read here about the Edomites here in a moment. The Edomites were offspring of Esau, and they still resided in that area, but there probably wasn't 100 square miles of the land of Edom. It just wasn't that big of a zone. They didn't have these massive kingdoms, but all the kings that were around there, nobody could believe that this was going to happen and that Jerusalem had fallen. And so it had to be God who did it, because nobody thought that any of the kings of the earth could come and overtake this fortress that was Jerusalem.
Well, in one of the first, second Kings, I don't know which one, but Samuel prays for a battle. And when Samuel was praying, they win the battle. And so other nations have figured out, their God is there, but then, now their God left. Now let's go.
Yeah. So you're talking about the one where they enter into the battle and everybody is like, we don't have enough dudes. And Samuel looks out and he says, there's a whole bunch of angels surrounding us here. Is that the one you're talking about? Yeah.
Well, there's a couple of battles that Samuel prayed him through.
Yeah. That's pretty cool though. But the very hand of God being with the people was what made the difference. And so God's hand being withdrawn or even turned against his own people because of their evil nature, it brought this kind of crazy havoc. So it was for the sins of her prophets. Now here, this is interesting. And the iniquities of her priests who shed in the midst of her the blood of righteousness. Now, what does a prophet do? A prophet is a seer, right? They can, one of the things that a prophet can do is see the future. Really, most of the times the prophets were just the mouthpiece of God. But in certain instances, the prophets are giving this ability to see into the future and to predict what was going to happen. Well, what are these prophets doing? They were blind. What good is a blind prophet? He can't see a thing. And again, because of their evil, because of the evil inside of the prophets and the priests, these are the leaders. As the leaders go, so the people go, right? So when the leaders don't have a heart for God, and the leaders have closed their eyes to God, and the leaders are simply, how do I want to say it? Kind of doing the perfunctory functions, but not really have a heart for it. They're doing what in Lutheran terms we call the sacerdotal duties. That means that you can lead the sacrament and you can teach the Bible, but if your heart isn't in it, that's what they had. They were still doing the things that you were supposed to do. Fascinating, right? They were.
This became ritual.
It became a ritual, yeah. And so these people who were defiled with blood, they were the ones who were supposed to be using the blood of the sacrifices to make right with God, but instead they're defiled by the blood. It's because their hearts are wrong. It's because their hearts are no longer true to Yahweh. Their hearts are for themselves. That's not a far jump for any of us, just to be honest, right? Isn't it? Can't you see how people do what comes to them naturally instead of what comes to them supernaturally? I think we all have that partly in us. That which comes to us naturally is to point at the other person and say, they're the problem. That which comes to us supernaturally looks inside and says, I'm the problem. It helps us deal rightly with who we are, and it keeps God at the center. If they're always the problem, then guess what? The fix for my world is to get rid of them or to box them out or to somehow show myself as better than them. But if the problem is here, then the only solution is there. And so this is what they had lost. They had lost this, this upward looking. And so their eyes were pretty fixed on the things that were seeable and doable and what they could see. So they wandered blind through their streets. They were so defiled with blood that no one was able to touch their garments. This was not what was supposed to happen with the blood. The blood was supposed to be a cleansing blood. The blood of the sacrificial animals was to cleanse them and make them right with God, to make them righteous. This was Old Testament righteousness.
Well, they didn't walk the streets full of blood. They changed their clothes.
Yes, but now they are. Yeah, they were walking through the streets. Now they're blind and wandering through the streets with their bloody garments on.
Oh.
So it's a mess. This is all icky. That's the big theological word for all of this Lamentations section. It's icky. Yeah, Kristen.
I'm just wondering, tying this back to verse 11.
Okay.
If I remember correctly, you said that Zion, when they use the word Zion,
Yep.
it's about the spiritual more
usually.
than the physical
Yep,
Jerusalem.
yep.
So I wonder if that verse is more like figurative and spiritual about consuming the foundation
Could be.
of their religious life.
Yeah.
Not just about the physical Jerusalem, but about the spiritual life of all of them, because then it
Yep.
goes on in 13 to talk about how the
Yep.
priests are all,
My Vanna White is not working. Do you have the clicker? Can you make that move forward one, Kim? Thank you. Thank you. I am clicker deprived today. Yes. Such second world problems, whatever. First world problems. Yeah. I think you're right, Kristen. I also think they're because the destruction. Like for example, archaeological studies that have gone back and kind of looked for evidence of this invasion of the Babylonians have found that it was utterly destroyed. And so maybe it's a double entendre, maybe it's a both and. It's both. I do think you're right, though. It's when we see Zion, Zion represents the spiritual name for Jerusalem. Oh, I love Mount Zion. It is God's holy city, blah, 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 blah. It's not just the physical thing, it's the spiritual thing that it represents. And so the foundations are shaken there as well. No doubt about it. Kim, let's go forward one more. Thank you. Away, unclean, people cried at them. Away, away, do not touch. So they're talking again here about the priests and the prophets. We don't want them around because they are phony baloney. Away, away, do not touch. So they became fugitives and wanderers. People said among the nations, they shall not stay with us longer. The Lord himself has scattered them, and he will regard them no more. No honor was shown to the priests, no favor to the elders. So I think the main point here is these people who were so pivotal and important are now shunned. Because the Lord has withdrawn his hand of blessing. But the reason the Lord has withdrawn their hand of blessing is because of their own sinfulness.
What made them turn when they were such pivotal people? I mean, they had it going on.
I don't know.
We have a saying as a teacher, where your eyes go, your brain follows.
Explain that in context of her question.
So,
I mean, I think I know what you're saying, but I'll let you say it.
they weren't following God, they weren't looking up.
Yeah.
They were looking at all the things
The things that-
and
yeah.
making idols and
Yep.
thinking, oh, my life will be better if.
Well, and remember the cultural context here is they had started to co-opt with these other religions around them. So, in the New Testament times, Jesus goes through Samaria, and the Samaritans were bad people, right? Samaritans were half-breeds. They were part Jewish, and they were part co-opted between Assyrians and all of these other religions around them. And so what was happening, they lived in this kind of melting pot where everybody started to kind of take on each other's beliefs. And so God had said, I, the Lord, am one. I am not to be co-opted with these other gods that you guys are bringing into the temple. And they were bringing temple prostitutes into the temple because that's what the other religions were doing. They started to sacrifice infants in the temple because that's what the other cult people around them and the culture were doing. And so they were like, I want to be like them. I want to be like the successful people. Like today I would say, this is where the prosperity gospel takes root kind of thing. I want to be like them. They have a lot of people showing up because they have a rock band and smoke machines at church. And so then the Lutherans say, we should be just like them. And we kind of co-opt our theology and say, no, the center of it is not the show. The center of it is Jesus. And I think that is, I think that's what kind of happened is they co-opted with, and I'm not saying that all the people who have smoke machines are going to hell. I'm not saying that. But, there's this old slippery slope concept. And where does the slippery slope kind of start and end and all of that? I didn't go into it in the sermon this morning, but I had a lot of thoughts on slippery slopes. Because, for example, well, let's say that you don't call out the people who are eating meat offered to idols. Well, what's the consequence there? Is that a slippery slope? Or if you do call them out, is that a slippery slope? And how do you process all of these things? They're complicated, right? I didn't really have enough time, and I got so flustered by my lack of clicker that I forgot what I was going to say, and it went out one ear and out the other. But
you actually turned into a little Rain Man when you didn't clicker. You look like a Rain Man.
I don't know if that's good or bad, but
it's not good.
Okay. Hey, but Rain Man ruled Vegas, man. So
you weren't in Vegas, though.
I know I wasn't in Vegas. So anyway. Okay. What am I talking about? I don't know.
Talking about how a slippery slope.
Yeah, slippery
Satan
slope.
loves to use things
Yep.
very subtly, and then all of a sudden it goes back and you're like, how did I get here?
That feels like Bible class every Sunday. How did I get here? Dorothy.
It's a matter of the heart, a lot of it, because I
Agreed.
think that when we say creating me a clean heart.
Yeah.
And then we say cast us not away from thy presence,
Yeah.
take not the Holy Spirit away from us.
Yeah.
That's kind of what all this is going on, he's
Yeah.
cast away.
Good word. Yeah. Comes back to, I love this line that I first heard from Tim Keller. I don't know if he came up with it or not, but humans are idol-making machines, always taking good things and turning them into ultimate things.
Yeah.
Right? So any good thing, a good glass of wine and a good steak, if that becomes an ultimate thing for you, you can become a glutton and a wino pretty quick, right? But in moderation, all these things can be gifts of God. And so how do you, not go down that slippery slope? Well, it's humility is what I think what Dorothy is saying, is create in me a clean heart. You have to have, to actually mean those words, you have to have a humble heart. And you have to say, yeah, I could turn into a Pharisee pretty quick. Create in me a clean heart, oh God. That's a humble thing. That's a bowing down thing. There's a God who's bigger than me. I think the natural temptation is to think that we are gods.
And to be cast away from his presence,
Yeah.
that's.
That's the worst. This is where this goes, right? Cast away from God's presence. The priests and the prophets and the kings are now outside wanderers. They're embarrassing. It's shameful. They were shown no honor to the priests, no favor to the elders. Pay attention, Joe. One of our, just kidding. So this whole thing is, again, it's disturbing. Oh, Kim, can you? Thank you. She's all over it. So our eyes failed, ever watching vainly for help. In our watching, we watched for a nation which could not save. You dogged our steps so that we could not walk in our streets. Our end drew near. Our days were numbered, for our end had come. This is a very somber statement of reality, huh? He's like, look at where we are. The end has come. Now, the good news that we know is this, that the resurrection has happened. And in spite of however sinful God's people are, his love is greater. His love is so great. Yes, he will for a season cast his people away, but he will always come back. We talked about this as God's natural work and his foreign work. There's some other terms that go along with that too, but this is what God does naturally. This is what God has to do as a discipline. And both of these can be at work in our lives. And his natural work is to love and forgive and renew and restore and create. His foreign work is to discipline, to chasten his people so that he can get their attention. And that's what he was doing here. And finally, their view of it is our end has come and there is no hope. Maybe you felt that way sometime. I had a conversation this week with a guy who I just met. And as the conversation went along, I could tell he was really depressed. And I said, are you thinking about hurting yourself? He said, yes. And I said, do you have a plan? And he said, not really. And I said, good. And I gave him my card and I said, if you develop a plan, call me because you're going to need some help. You are already depressed, I said, but don't do what you think will help you because it won't.
Destroy you.
It'll destroy you. Yeah. That is not that your solution is not ending your own life. That's where these guys are. That's where Jeremiah is in his lament. Jeremiah he can't see the forest from the trees. All he can see is the end. Now, in a couple verses, he'll change his tune again, and that's a beautiful thing. But maybe you felt that, or maybe you know people who felt that. And it's a terrible place to be. People have asked me, what should I do if somebody says they're thinking about hurting themselves? I said, ask them about it. Are you thinking of hurting yourself? And get the conversation out there, because the only way that they can get help is if they acknowledge that they're having that thought. If it just stays in their head, the chances are more likely that they will hurt themselves. And men are like 5 times as successful at suicide as women. Women often will take an overdose but men usually will get a gun. Women don't usually go to a gun. A gun is pretty permanent. Always going to die from a gunshot to the head. Okay, happy Mother's Day again.
The end has come.
The end has come. I'm sorry I went there, but I feel like sometimes people just need to be equipped. How do I deal with this when somebody says to me, I'm so down, I don't know what to do. I think I'm thinking of ending it. Well, then say to them, are you really thinking of ending it? And do you have a plan? You assess the lethality of the plan. If the plan is like, in a couple weeks, I might drive off a cliff, Or, no, I have a gun at home and I'm planning to go get it in a few minutes. That's a very different conversation. The gun at home and I'm going to go do it in a few minutes, that's a 911 call. That's what you do. You get them to a place where they can be safe. The other is still a very important thing, not to be brushed under the rug, but I don't think there's anybody in here as a trained counselor. So that's not your job to fix people. But your job is, as a Christian, to help them in every way that you can, right?
Give them hope.
Give them hope, yeah. Heaven,
Accept.
yes. Yep.
Receive.
Yeah, receive them.
I like that, what you said today, instead of accepting to receive.
Yeah, accepting is a weak word. Receiving is a much better word. And tolerating is not a good word at all.
I was just kidding.
But tolerance is the word of the day in our culture, right?
Oh, yeah.
Everybody says, well, I remember in my mind, tolerance as a buzzword started about 9/11, where we have to have a greater tolerance for people of different beliefs. And underlying that is like, there are no right and wrong beliefs. Everybody's belief is to be accepted.
Yeah, for sure.
There's truth and there's lies.
But today there's no truth.
Well, that's the point. I didn't get into all of that, but you're exactly right, Landon. We have basically said that whatever you believe is truth for you, and I'll believe that what's truth for me, and we'll just kind of peacefully coexist. And that's not what Paul was saying. That's not what he was saying when he said, accept them. He was saying, go out of your way to welcome them and bring them in so that they can, by your love, start to experience a better way.
Right. Well,
and yeah.
Some states, I think, maybe some countries where they're trying to make it easy for people to commit suicide, make it okay.
Yeah.
Not illegal for a doctor to assist with it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Terrible.
No, these things are hard. 2 weeks ago, I counseled with a family they were like, mom had a stroke and the doctors tell us that she's not going to recover. And is it okay if we say we're going to go ahead and take the life support off? And I said, yes, it is okay. Because her brain function was never going to return. But that's a hard conversation. That's a hard conversation.
Partly though, our technology sustains life.
Yeah, you can keep,
Where
they could have kept her
before,
alive
she may
for
have
30
just
years.
Died in her sleep.
But
Yeah.
that's different.
That's
Giving
different.
something to somebody
Actively,
who
it is.
actively, who will continue living unless.
Taking away life support is different than actively administering a drug that kills people. I agree with that.
Exactly.
That's exactly
And
right.
what they call merciful
Yeah,
suicide.
right.
By physicians is totally different than if their brain has already been.
Yeah, yeah.
Diagnosed as not alive.
Yeah, and so, yeah, but these are real people with real grief and real attachments and wondering, is this okay? What should I do? And so, these are real things. And yeah, Dorothy.
When you talk about truth, other people believe in different, it's opinion. There's one truth.
Yes.
And the rest is really opinion.
Yes.
Perceptions.
Yes.
Yeah.
According to the Bible, right? Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. That there is one way. Now, does that give us the right to say, I'm right and you're wrong, so buck up and do what I tell you because the Bible is right? No, obviously not. But some people use that verse as a weapon, as opposed to really understanding what Jesus is saying. Jesus is saying, if you really love people, get underneath them, walk alongside them, elevate them, lift them up so that they can, for themselves, see the glory of God. And this is an art, not a science. It's an art to be able to lead people into a place where they will see Jesus clearly, right? And by God's grace, we're all learning this art. It takes a whole life to learn this art, and we're never going to be done with it. And so God is, while we were still sinners, Christ died for me, right? So he didn't say, Doug, clean up your act first and then come to me, and then I'll think about forgiving you. He said, no, I'm pouring my life out for you so that you can pour your life out for other people. So, yeah. All right, I think we're gonna stop here. Is that okay with you guys?
Yes.
Happy Mother's Day.
Do you have a encouraging verse you can end with?
Let's do this. He is risen.
No, not-
He is risen. Hallelujah.
There it is. That's it. That's what we need to walk out with. Yeah. Thank you, Jimmy.
We have putting Lamentations.
Yeah. We'll keep Lamentations in its place. Yeah. Good stuff. All right, go in peace and have your lunch or whatever you're gonna do. Yeah. Beat the Baptist, the Lubies, whatever. Yeah.